Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Titanian Warrior, the Titanian Chronicles, Book 3 by Victoria Saccenti, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Shivalac Hills, Nepal. The towering pair of boulders stood as gatekeepers and markers of the way. A steep path snaked between them until farther down the hill the road disappeared in thick fog. Leaning on the closest rock, Hagen steadied himself to catch his breath, then pushed on. Bloodlust crippled his Titanian vision. Still, he stumbled, rolled, and crawled over jagged rocks and gnarled roots with single-minded determination to reach his appointed meeting place, the cavern at the base of the Shivalacs, and the sole entrance to Hades' domain on the earthly plane. A perverse satisfaction filled him each time he scraped and sliced his exposed skin, as this was only a precursor to the punishment he deserved. If he could shred his flesh to strips in anticipation as he had done with his clothes, so much the better. Hagen advanced through the haze, seeking the deity's promised signal. Images of his frenzy during the last skirmish prodded him. He strained past horror-filled images, and the effort paid off. There, deep within the haze, a faint red light marked the spot. Alecto had not forgotten. A hitched breath escaped his lungs as he stood and trod on a more secure step. As the haze dissipated, the cavern's hungry mouth gaped before him. Healing and deliverance acquired through pain would soon be his. As he inched closer to the wavering light, he removed the last remaining strips of clothing. The offering had to be bare and unadulterated. Nothing but skin would satisfy the fury, purify his spirit, and postpone the horror of termination for another 10 years, a mere blip in the lifespan of a Titanian. And yet a decade offered hope and an opportunity to continue his search for true salvation, his eternal mate. His brother Soren had been at the edge of obliteration when the universe revealed Maya's symbol in his scrolls. He'd been given a Simurgh, no less the most powerful of all Phoenix mates. Soren's joy and deliverance had pleased Hagen without reservation or a covetous thought. His brother had earned such a high reward. But what about him? Was he unworthy of an eternal mate of love and companionship? He'd only wished for a small slice of heaven. His cousin Roald had found eternal happiness with Ginny. Staring at an endless existence of service and loneliness was a frightening prospect for a Titanian of any rank. Hagen could never be the brilliant fighter Soren was, and had on occasion not followed every command to the letter. Nevertheless, he'd proven his mettle in unwavering loyalty to the Titanian cause in and out of combat. Many a night he'd promised to change his unorthodox ways and toe the line if only the universe would grant him a Phoenix mate. Alas, no. He'd been denied time and again. After witnessing from the sidelines the mating ceremony and resulting Titanian bliss, frustration burned a hole in his chest. Before the emotion turned to bitterness, he escaped to his old demon hunting grounds in Asia. On his flight back, he realized that his cherished airplane and state-of-the-art electronic gadgets no longer satisfied or entertained him. Even that last bit of gratification had been taken from him, because seeing happiness unfold for Soren and Roald had displayed in real time what mattered: the completion a mate brought to a Titanian soul. The beaming couples had stepped up onto a new plane of existence. After witnessing their ascendance, no fancy equipment could ever fulfill him. The hole in his chest turned black and cold. Blood hunger, the deadly lust, awoke. Visions tortured him. Rage drove him to living nightmares. He searched for minion hideouts and sought conflict at every turn. In the heat of these encounters, bloodlust blinded him to allies and friends who'd trusted him with their lives. Asian black bear and clouded leopard shifters had perished under his hands. While his bewildered, dying friends pleaded for their lives, he'd only seen minions. The red haze controlled him, and he'd indulged this insatiable hunger to spill all blood. The last clash had been the worst. Standing on a promontory, Hagen viewed an endless battlefield stained with red blood, green ooze, and mutilated remains. And as the mental fog cleared, horror captured his soul, and he fell on his knees, begging the universe for help. The chthonic deity, the implacable Alecto, heard and replied in his mind: "Await my arrival at the place of atonement." Explanations had not been necessary. Hagen's Titanian spirit, same as every supernatural in the earthly plane, knew the location of the terrible gate. In eras past, he'd avoided going near it. Now, stripped to his natural state, defeated and humbled, he entered the darkness with a bowed head and an anxious demeanor. To his right, 4 stone-like posts spread in a rectangular formation jutted out of the rock wall. Hagen studied them, unsure of what to do. Step in, face out and clasp the posts. Place your ankles outside each one, the Fury instructed. Receive and accept the pain, Titanian. Do not flinch or resist. Show your contrition. Only then will the universe accept your offering. Once he settled into position, he stood spread eagle. The posts offered no additional hooks or handles he could cling to. He had to remain in place on his own. It was the same with his ankles. His will and consent were his only aids. Then the punishment's sinister intent became clear. Any reaction on his part, however small to the pain, would nullify the process. Well done, son of Fridtjof. Your astuteness is a credit to the Westerberg line. Alecto's voice snaked out of the darkness. Utter submission to the punishment is a requisite. From deep within the cave, an immense shadow stirred, emerged, and formed. An aura of unfathomable power unfolded the deity when huge black-like wings unfurled at her back. She hulked over him as bloodshot eyes glared and a claw-like fingernail sprang before him. Do not falter. The slightest twitch ends the process and we're forced to start anew. Do you accept the terms? Yes, lady, I'm in your hands. Excellent. Piercing his shoulder with a sharp talon, she smirked with hideous lips. As she sliced down his chest, the excruciating pain and stench of burning flesh overwhelmed Hagen's senses. A deep-seated shiver ran through him as his survival instincts kicked in. The urge to recoil and flee battered him. Instead, remembering the sins that had brought him to this place, he delivered all anguish to his fingers and clutched the post with a fierce grip. Maybe he couldn't flinch away. Somehow, holding on offered a relief of sorts. His muscles stiffened when Alecto dug a second claw into the Titanian tattoo on his shoulder. He allowed a shallow breath to escape as she traced the T and Celtic ribbon with a singeing finger. His knees threatened to buckle. Do not fear, son of Fridtjof, she hissed, putrid breath invading his nostrils. No power can remove the Titanian symbol. It's embedded in your essence. He faced the floor in obeisance. I'm your servant, lady. Please, do your worst. She presented him with a full set of claws, dug into his abdomen, and tore upward, opening 4 lacerations. A fresh round of burning pain promised to take his reason away. As rivulets of blood sluiced down his stomach and legs to a growing puddle on the ground, bits of guilt in his soul coalesced and lifted. Alecto's punishment was transforming him. Her healing talons went deep, cutting far beneath the outer layer of flesh and into the vortex of remorse he carried. A single tear of gratitude mingled with his sweat. However temporary, a reprieve was coming. Cease now! A thunderous command ricocheted off the cavernous walls. Alecto's hands stopped. Bending her head, she dropped one knee. The ground trembled under her weight. Out in the world, buildings would collapse and humans would scramble in fear at the massive seismic motion. Hagen glanced wildly throughout the empty space. He'd spoken with lesser gods before, but this preternatural sound belonged to an Olympian. He shivered in terror. Forgive me, my lord, he begged for help, Alecto pleaded. This is forbidden, the disembodied voice countered. It is the universe's purview to grant the favor he seeks, and only at the proper time. Away with him. But my lord, Alecto directed her voice to an indistinct spot above her head. He's a Titanian. You favor his race. Yes, his race is highly favored. Nevertheless, all gods and supernaturals are bound to universal dictates. Disobeying directives brings chaos. Neither I nor any of my subjects will violate the established order. Send him away. Slowly, the huge deity stood. A sad expression which surprised Hagen softened her monstrous features. Tucking in her wings, she extended the clawed hand toward the opening of the cavern. Depart, Titanian. My lord Hades commands it. Is that it? I'm rogue. Bloodlust is still within me. Am I doomed to termination? I am forbidden to help, son of Fridtjof. Do not resist. May the universe take pity on you. Alecto touched his forehead, and his vision turned black. Chapter 1. The pallet creaked under Faiza's weight as she rolled onto her side. The old dreams were back and as vivid as ever. She'd spent a restless night curled into a ball while her unconscious mind navigated a multitude of convoluted images and flaming mystical symbols. The first dream of this kind had appeared when she transitioned to her childbearing phase. Despite her efforts to puzzle them out, the lifelike snippets, more vivid and realistic than dreams, had made no sense at all. Last night's confusion still reigned. If anything, the dream had carried such an ominous feeling, she knew the sensation would stay with her all day. She stood, one aching limb at a time, eyeing her still warm sheets. If only she could linger a few more minutes. Impossible. House chores waited for no one. She arched in a deep stretch, limbering up. The schedule had to be kept. Arriving late at the fields had unpleasant consequences. Tardiness angered Master O, and cheating while he was away didn't work. His remote vision allowed him to monitor the home and their actions. His ire was a brutal lightning storm in the desert. She did everything to appease him. Lilith, unaware of life around her, snored on the pallet next to Faiza's. Her older sister hadn't stirred once and would likely remain out of it until the breakfast parathas had been warmed, tea brewed, and their lunch prepared. She had the soul of an aristocrat trapped in the body of a peasant woman. A foolish attitude, as it was at times, a source of frustration with the accompanying bout of temper. But unlike Faiza, Lilith enjoyed challenging Master O. Strangely, the master had indulged her tantrums. Theirs was a peculiar relationship. Faiza had often caught Master O studying Lilith, a shadow of anticipation floating on his enigmatic features. On occasion, she'd been tempted to throw Master off balance with the truth, ask him what he thought was so special about Lilith. Did he expect her to perform acts of wonder? Lilith had been born with the breathless beauty women envied and men desired in their beds, an important power by human standards, but no magic. A key detail wise Ami and Abi had kept to themselves in the negotiations. Faiza filled the tea kettle, then put it on the tiny burner. Once the flame was lit, she moved to the window and pulled the threadbare curtains aside. The view hadn't changed since yesterday, the day before, or the one before that. In the long cavalcade of mornings Faiza had seen in this part of the subcontinent, a grayish tinge clung without fail to the morning sky. Trash and brush fires tended by the townspeople had burned throughout the night. Smoke had mingled with infinitesimal water droplets floating in the atmosphere. The result was a ravenous haze that threatened to swallow both man and landscape. The kettle whistled. Taking a deep breath, Faiza returned to the stove, repressing the longing in her soul. She didn't belong here. Some folks, mostly her parents, would deem her ungrateful for her attitude. Master O has specifically honored Lilith and you, two worthless village girls. You'll see the world. Be thankful, her parents had argued. She remembered the flurry of whispers when the mysterious man emerged out of the wilderness on horseback and leading a loaded camel. No one in the village had seen or heard of Master O before. However, the elegance of his clothing, transport, and goods spoke of untold riches. He visited her parents' tent, offering a generous open-ended agreement. Fortune and abundance would be theirs for the duration of Lilith's and Faiza's service. Since Lilith's and Faiza's opinions were unimportant, Ahmad and Habiba had accepted his terms without a counteroffer. Master O took them from a barren desert to a land of ever-growing vegetation and oppressive humidity. Faiza missed her native country, where the unforgiving sun, pinned to a clear blue sky, roasted beast and man alike. Despite the arid conditions, her soul had thrived since birth in that harsh environment. She'd been at one with the elements, had joined the erratic flight of mischievous jinns up and down the dunes, and had cherished her private conversations with the desert gods. Here, she was an unknown entity and had nothing in common with a place of water. Hindu yakshas weren't playful, and devas didn't care to converse. Vayu, ruler of wind, air, and breath, had swept past her and scoffed at her insignificance. He hadn't come back. As Faiza slid the first patty onto the hot griddle, Lilith stirred. The spicy scent of aloo paratha's cooking must have alerted her brain to food. Up already, Faiza? Good morning. Lilith rubbed her face. Sorry I overslept. I was so tired. What do I need to do? Faiza chuckled under her breath and took a sip of dark tea. After last night's dream, she'd brewed the beverage stronger than usual. It was exactly what she needed to face the incertitude of the seventh day, the 24-hour period when Master O was scheduled to arrive from one of his journeys. This could be a joyous or frightening occasion. His moods depended on the success of his ventures. Parathos are coming. Faiza slid the next patty onto the grill. Wash up before breakfast if you like. Don't take too long. I'm not keeping them warm and I'm not waiting for you to eat. I'm hungry. And don't forget, Master arrives today. Yes, I heard you, Lilith laughed, standing. So bossy. I'll be right back, but don't wait for me. I won't, she retorted. As the next patty sizzled, she dropped generous dollops of curd onto their plates and filled a bowl with spicy pickles. By the time she wrapped chapatis and packed small containers of sag paneer for lunch, Lilith had returned fresh-faced and wearing her favorite house dress. This was her one-of-a-kind gown, given according to custom to the oldest daughter and sewn the day she'd entered womanhood. Omi had poured all the dreams, good wishes, and hopes of the family into this silky, shimmering gown. The fabric enhanced Lilith's stunning gray irises, and she wore it whenever possible. Are you sure I can't help? Faiza glanced at her sideways. What, get your dress stained? Omi would kill me. Omi is not here. She sat down, sniffing the air. Smells great. No one does potatoes like you do, sis. You're hitting the flattery hard. Don't let Kashfi down the road hear you. She's the one who taught me. Lilith dipped her fingers in the curd and quickly tasted it. I'd say you've surpassed her talent. Faiza served the second patty, then passed the plate to her sister. Where's your food? I thought you were hungry. You get started. My paratha will be ready in a moment. We have 30 minutes to eat and get to the fields. Oh, right. The rice harvest. Lilith made a face. I don't understand his obsession. Hush, Lilith. Why do you insist on testing him? He hears and sees everything. Being on time is not a big requirement. Not to you, maybe, she shrugged. Honestly, what is the purpose of reaping and collecting bundles of rice we're not going to cook or eat? If we donated it to needy families without able workers, it might make some sense. Do you know where the rice goes after it's gathered? Perhaps it's not about the rice or the harvest. He's testing our obedience. Faiza brought her plate and sat down to eat. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. I serve and obey him. I haven't tried to leave. Because if you did, ruin would fall upon Omi and Abi. You're a responsible first daughter. Lilith's silvery gaze gleamed. Eat your paratha. I'm tired of this conversation. Sure, Faiza mumbled. She was just as tired of the push and pull tension between Master O and Lilith. The next few minutes passed in an uncomfortable silence. Lilith finished first. Hands folded under her chin, she waited for Faiza to take her last bite, then took both plates to the sink. Get changed while I wash the plates. Don't worry. I'll be ready to leave with my work clothes on. Thank you, Faiza murmured. Seventh day makes me nervous. He's so temperamental when he returns. I never know what to expect or how to prepare. Don't worry, she smiled. Leave Master to me. I'll handle him. Until the day when he won't let you, Faiza thought as she started to change clothes. A hazy sun had descended halfway toward the horizon. The sky had acquired a burnt orange hue. Working in a dense field of faded yellow and brown stalks, the laboring women wearing their colorful saris stood out like gleaming rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. The juxtaposition had bewildered Faiza from the very first day she came out. These women were poor with very few resources to feed their families, and yet the vivid color and silky richness of their clothing could satisfy the most demanding royal anywhere in the world. To her right, a full acre had been cut clean to the base, and the rice was piled in large round bundles. They were making good progress. Blade in hand, Lilith popped out of a sea of stalks. She frowned as she tied another bunch together to throw over her shoulder. It's getting late. He may not come today. That's a first. She visored her eyes with her palm, then squinted at the bend in the dirt road. Faiza exhaled. No, Master is coming. He's riding in a dark vehicle, and he's bringing a stranger with him. Is it clear, the vision? Lilith asked. Partly. Master is sitting on the front seat. The driver looks European or maybe American, but that's not what matters. There's someone else. You're being more accurate than usual. Let's gather our stuff and head home. We should hurry. He will need us. Why? What else do you see? Faiza rubbed her forehead. Seeing ahead gave her headaches. The clearer the vision, the stronger the headache, and this one promised to be bad. Not see, it's more of a certainty, like a whispered message. Whoever he's bringing will affect us, though. I don't know how. Great. Complications. Just what we need. Lilith grumbled as she sheathed her blade and grouped her bundles together. Faiza did the same and quickly brought her work to Cherim, the harvest overseer. Forgive us, Cherim, Faiza bowed, placing her bundles next to his feet. Master O is returning from a long voyage, and we have to be home when he arrives. We'll finish tomorrow. All right, he grumbled. I'm keeping your work apart from the others, but be here first thing in the morning, otherwise you lose your quota. Yes, that is your right. Thank you. Faiza pressed her palms together, bowed again, and ran toward the road. Lilith imitated the salute and took off after her. By the time she reached the side path leading to their home, a black SUV had already parked on the side. The driver was opening the door for Master O, who was big on ceremony and protocol. As Faiza hurried forward, Master gestured at the driver toward the vehicle's rear door, then scowled at her. Could you move any faster? He demanded. What a surprise, he's in a mood, Faiza murmured to Lilith. Lilith nodded and picked up the pace. In moments, they had reached the SUV's open door. Faiza peeked inside and her breath rushed out. The stranger in her vision had a face and was half stretched out on the row of seats. He was hurt, half-conscious, and huge. Every exposed part of him had a bloody cut as if he'd been in a fight and lost. His ill-fitting, ratty clothes must have belonged to someone much smaller. She guesstimated he was somewhere around 7 feet. No way could she help him out by herself. Go around, try to push him my way a little, she directed Lilith. Her sister nodded. Let me do that, I'm stronger, the driver said. You two be ready to bring him out when I push. Their coordinated effort worked. Moments later, Faiza and Lilith situated themselves under the massive male's armpits and with the driver's help managed to guide him inside the home. Master O, surveying the operation from a distance, gestured toward a brand new pallet in the living room. Put him there, he said as if the bed had been there for years. Faiza shook her head, accepting the pallet's sudden appearance. So much had changed since Lilith and she came into Master's service. From the beginning, he had been careful about showing his powers. As months passed in his company, he eased them into his abilities. On occasion, he'd answer Lilith's private thoughts as her simple human mind couldn't stop his psychic intrusion. Master had tried with Faiza, but his mind push failed. With every attempt, her innate defensive magic had risen to block him. Strangely, he'd never asked her if she did anything to stop him. Then he expanded their exposure. He'd cast an enchantment here, a higher spell of creation there. The increments were easy to digest, nothing too wild or so big that it would send Faiza and her sister running in a panic for the hills. Later, she'd assumed his remote vision was part of his abilities. Now, she and Lilith took his enormous ability in stride. Your guest is settled. Do you require anything else, sir? The driver asked. No, you may depart, Master said. I'm pleased with your services. I will contact your mistress and give her my compliments. After a deferential bow, the driver walked out. The male on the pallet made rasping noises. He fidgeted as he swiped a large hand at an unseen entity. Spiritual pain and despair streamed out of him in silent waves. An aching need in him had searched the room, found her empathic abilities, and latched on. He transmitted a clear message. He'd lost all hope, had sought help, and had found none. Death would be the next step for him. Faiza took out her blanket and draped it around him as best she could. He was so much larger than her. She then turned to the kitchen where she could tear dish rags to make compresses and wash off the caked blood. Master O blocked her path. Stop that, he said. Your job is to cook for our guest. That's as close as you will get to him. Lilith will clean him and tend to his needs. He glanced at Lilith. His coal-like irises gleamed with an eerie light. A chilling sensation filled Faiza's heart. She shivered as he went on speaking. Whichever those requirements may be, carnal or spiritual, Lilith will satisfy them. Do you both understand me? Lilith stiffened. She flicked her long braid to her back as her rebellious streak rose. Faiza sent her a begging glance. Her sister tilted her head, refusing her plea. Oh, I understand you well, Lilith said, but carnal duties were not included in the contract. If you require additional services, we will renegotiate the terms and our parents will be paid accordingly. He sighed. Why do you push me, Lilith? Me, sir? She mellowed her tone. I don't push you, Master. I only clarify. He took a menacing step. Puffing out her chest, Faiza stood next to her sister and he stopped. The corner of his fleshy lips lifted in an ugly sneer. Faiza, ever the faithful mutt, always guarding her betters. You win, Lilith. I'm willing to wait. After a day or so, you could find our guest charming. He is a fine specimen, in which case intimate care might be a pleasure, not a hindrance. Grasping her wrist, he whispered close to her face, "Don't forget you are my special lady. Through you, we will attain every dream and aspiration. Your parents will want for nothing, and the world will bend a knee to us. That's a guarantee." He dropped her hand. "Now, I'm going to change out of these uncomfortable European clothes. Meanwhile, get the meal started, Faiza. Our guest needs nourishment, and so do I. It's been a long search." Turning, Master disappeared into his room. "He's changed. These new duties and his attitude scare me," Faiza whispered. "I'm worried for you. Why do you test him?" "We've come a long way from harvesting rice, that's for sure." Lilith sent a doubtful glance at her new charge. The man had settled into a calmer sleep. He no longer fidgeted or swatted at the air. "Master's right. He's kind of good-looking in a huge sort of way." Lilith shook her head. "But if the old windbag thinks he can order me to have sex with a stranger, he's out of his mind. I'm not his whore. He has to sweeten the pot or give me a powerful reason. And what's his issue with you? All of a sudden, you're the official cook? And why can't you go near this guy? What if he likes you better when he wakes up? You're the nurturing one, not me." Faiza moved closer to the pallet. "He's in a lot of pain," she studied him. "Can't you feel his suffering?" "No." Lilith stood at her side. "That's my point. You've already linked with our guest, and I couldn't care less if he lives or dies." "Don't say that." "It's true," she scoffed. "I want every promise made to our parents kept. Master has offered influence and power. That's as close to magic as I'm ever going to get. I find it so bewildering that for all his ancient knowledge and so-called abilities, he continues to miss the real source of power. He's a blind fool, but I'm not going to disabuse him of his folly, and you're too kind and too gentle to embarrass him with the truth. Although the way he treats you, he deserves to be shamed." "What if he realizes?" Lilith chuckled. "We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Meanwhile, I intend to extract it all. I didn't leave our parents' tent for a few stingy coins. He's promised me the world. Didn't you hear him?" Faiza nodded. "He better deliver."